Once the mountain began to settle down after the initial eruption, scientists got their first close-up look at the devastation, and it was nothing like what they expected.
When we first went in there, it was kind of disorienting because so much had changed. The old growth forests that were north, northwest, and northeast of the volcano were gone and had been replaced by a relatively smooth slopes covered with ash. And your initial perception is that everything's dead. I mean, I think President Carter referred to it. He said it makes the moon look like a golf course. And the other thing that was really difficult was scale. You know, these large 3-foot diameter trees were snapped in two. People described them as toothpicks when you were flying in a helicopter.
And trying to identify, looking at the Tula River Valley, where was the highway? Where did that come in at? And, you know, and finding the places where the highway used to go is covered by walls of mud and debris.
A lot of people wonder what happened to the top of Mount St. Helens. Where did it go? After all, the mountain used to be 9,000 feet tall. Well, the answer to that question is, I am standing on what used to be the top of Mount St. Helens. This is ash and debris that is almost a football field deep.
Did go up, and I was kind of amazed at the landscape. Camp was covered with, you know, several hundred feet of mud.
There was not one green living thing in any direction, zero color. You didn't get to see a brown or a tan. Everything was ash gray.
The soils remained in place, although perhaps buried under tephra and ash that was deposited, and then further buried for good measure by pyroclastic flows. These were flows of incandescent pumice up to 800 degrees Celsius. So any biological molecules that were remaining there after the avalanche would have been vaporized and I assume reduced to their component elements or compounds. So nothing biological remained.
I did wonder what would grow.
I had doubt in my own mind about whether or not we could reforest this, that trees would actually grow up here in my lifetime.
We never dreamed that we'd ever see anything in our lifetime come back.
Up in the center of the mountain, things were still happening.
The initial crater that was observed was pretty smooth looking, and there was a vent in the center of the crater, you know, on the order of, I don't know, hundreds of feet across. And so a series of muffin-like lava domes began to form with this oozing rock coming up to the surface, slow-moving lava flows.
This area is a monument not just to the power of nature, but also to the 57 people who are known to have died here. Their names appear on this plaque. A total of 21 bodies were recovered from the blast zone. That job fell to Mike Nichols of Cowlitz Search and Rescue.
The sheriff said, you know what, we need to start organizing searches, in fact recoveries, because chances of a rescue was pretty slim, but that far after, where I'm talking now weeks, maybe a month after the eruption. And we were on a mission for a particular person every day. We were successful. As a whole, we got, I think, maybe 21 recoveries from the time of the eruption till we finally quit. We ran out of leads.
With all of the destruction before them, one positive discovery was soon noticed by the scientists and recovery teams.
There were, I think, about 120 new lakes and ponds that were formed by the eruption. I think the most remarkable ones were Coldwater Lake and Castle Lake because these were quite large. They were formed by damming streams following the eruption.
There was nothing alive in them, but they were clear and clean, and they were bright blue or in some cases emerald green. Those were, to me, potential fishing areas. You know, I was thinking about fishing in the years to come. If they kind of stock those, or are the natural fish going to come back up?
As a young reporter in 1981, I landed in a news helicopter right over there next to Spirit Lake. There was downed timber everywhere. In fact, the lake was about half full of logs. Nothing alive around us. I have to tell you, it has been absolutely amazing to witness what has happened here over the last 30 years.
For everything that's a destructive force, there's also something created. I think as humans, our perspective is to think about what's destroyed in a catastrophe. But really, for an ecosystem, there's no value-based judgment there. The ecosystem starts from where it starts. As we landed and got in there on the ground and began to poke around, it was pretty clear where water had washed the ash away or where a crack had formed in the ash. There were many, many roots of plants that were still alive underneath that layer of ash. And where the ash was washed away by a stream on a stream side or on a steep slope, we began to see sprigs of those roots resprouting. So that timing of the eruption, that May timing when there was snow in the mountains, when the ground was wet and cold and the plants were dormant, was a key factor to lots of plants surviving where they could get through the overlying ash.
One of the important processes for the formation of new plant communities there was going to be, and has been, the formation of new soils. The eruption occurred in May. Snow was still on the ground. The gophers were still underground and under snow, and so they survived. They may not have had a lot to come back up to, but what the gophers ended up doing was they ended up mixing the soil. They ended up bringing old soils to the surface. Those soils included seeds, and so by mixing the volcanic ash with old soil and with seeds, that facilitated the germination and the establishment of plants.
What looked lifeless turned out to be anything but lifeless.